All right, peeps, here we go. I'm on a time crunch because I'm filling in and substitute teaching here. All right. 4.4, water pollution. Types of water pollution can be anthropogenic, which means created by humans, or natural. Most of the time, though, it's going to be through anthropogenic. It can be point or non-point, meaning there's like point can be like a single source, or it can be non-point, which means it's like kind of communal. It's not like one single thing that does it. Organic or inorganic. So you can have like, think about it, cow poop. It's organic, all right? And still be pollution. Um, Inorganic. Obviously, that's like somebody just throwing an aluminum can out on the road. So it can also be direct or indirect. If you need anything, I'm probably not available because I'm right doing a video. Ask Dr. Sorer for an example on page 28, then say if it is organic or inorganic, anthropogenic or natural, and the effects. All right? All right. Sources of freshwater pollution. What you need, D? Basketballs are out. What ball are you looking for? Bring it back. Okay, once you're done. Okay, I trust you. Don't lose it, please. All right. All right. Sources of freshwater pollution. Agricultural runoff, like a lot of it's from farms. So a lot of like, you put down fertilizer on a field. Some of it gets to the crops, but when it rains, it washes it right off into the nearest stream. Sewage. Yep. Sewer pipe coming right off. Yep. Industrial discharge. So a lot of times when they make things, they, that you basically have a lot of waste with it. It's out already. Yep. There's a solid domestic waste as well. Nope, that's class of 2025. Can't have it. All right. Sources of marine pollution include rivers, pipelines, the atmosphere, human activities, discharges. Measuring water pollution. Define these terms on page 229. Biochemical oxygen demand. By the way, that's going to be referred to as BOD or BOD, for the rest of this and probably, your DP session. Indicator species. Biotic index. Got you. Yep, I'm going to need you to define those three for me. Indicator species can be easily indicator species can be an early indicator that something in the environment ain't right. So if you see these animals in the environment, it's like, ooh, something ain't right about that environment. Might be pollution. Or if you don't see them, that's an indicator too. So if you're in the forest and you see all the birds and animals go one way, you might think there's a forest fire. All right. So back in the day, coal miners would take a canary bird into the coal mine with them because if the bird died, it was usually because the air was becoming poisonous from carbon monoxide or methane. It used to be a joke in my family that when you go into the bathroom after my dad, send in the canary to see if it lived because that bathroom probably stunk. All right. Toxic gases in there. Biotic index can be measured 1 through 10 and indicates the quality of an ecosystem. The types of species present is important. So, also the number of species is important as well for a biotic index. And that's how they measure it is 1 through 10. What is a point source of pollution? Factory dumping, a single factory dumping chemicals into the Farmington River. Hey, if there's a goat farm and that goat farm has a manure pile and it is leaching into the river, that is a point source. Biotic index versus BOD versus diversity index. Yep. Think of a point source sewer pipe that dumps into the river. Got it so far? Not too hard to imagine. So that sewer pipe pumps all that poop right into the river. Bacteria breaks down the poop aerobically. but uses a lot of oxygen in the water. So as a result, there's less oxygen in the water. Invertebrates, tiny bugs can survive different levels of oxygen. If they are there, it indicates the water is polluted because they'll like eat up the poop, and whatnot. But they'll also too survive in those low oxygen environments. Other animals do not. Um, Yep. BOD gives a measure in one moment in time. Biotic indexes give a more of a recent history of the event. So the BOD is like a snapshot, just like that. Where the biotic index tell more of like a story. You'll have to look up diversity index from chapter 2 or define it. So, um, hey, look, news flash for you. Biotic index, diversity index, and eutrophication are huge for DP exam, I find. So, just telling you, they love hitting those up. Eutrophication, extra nutrients added to an aquatic ecosystem. This can be natural, but anthropogenic, man made, is more common. So, um, can be fresh or salt water. And salt water, it tends to be more like red tide sort of stuff. It reduces oxygen in the water. If really bad, it creates dead zones where nothing lives. Um, Less severe is where you get biodegradation of organic material, breakdown of poop, and dead life. This is what's more common, which then leads to the dead zone. So, starts aerobically with oxygen, and then it makes anoxic, low oxygen conditions, and then becomes anaerobic decomposition, no oxygen. So it starts off really like with oxygen, aerobically breaking down the organic material or poop, dead plants, stuff like that. So as it starts aerobically though, and the oxygen level goes down, it starts becoming anaerobic, which anaerobic has its own problems. It makes methane, it makes hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia. Methane, the problem is it's a greenhouse gas. Um, and you're going to have to look up why hydrogen sulfide is bad besides the smell. And why is ammonia bad? So, yep. Let's give you this. Yeah, I'll give you a little second to catch up there. All right. Impacts of eutrophication. Rivers, lakes, ponds. A lot of your like fresh water that is not moving. All right. So any of that stagnant water. I know rivers can move, but this can happen in rivers too. It's just more common with lakes and ponds. Covered by green algae slime or scum and duckweed. So it stinks of rotten eggs from hydrogen sulfide usually, and then it's an oxygen deficient water as well, which causes loss of biodiversity because lack of oxygen, stuff dies. Food chains get shortened. Actually, I'm going to tell you what, food chains get destroyed by this because if there's no fishies, there's no birds going around to hunt for them. There's no otters. There's no life really. So the death of higher plants like flowers and reeds, which then just contributes even more towards that eutrophication and lack of life. Death of aerobic organisms like fish, frogs, and vertebrates, which are insects. Increased turbidity, cloudiness of water. Because once it gets to a certain point where it's now going towards anaerobic, you now just have like the what used to be organic living material like plants, and they're not breaking down and they're just becoming sludge at the bottom. They get stirred up, and when that gets stirred up, it just makes that water very murky. So, yep. Excessive nutrients are nitrates and phosphates. They come from detergents, which I'll be honest with you, I didn't really realize with. All right. Fertilizers, which I definitely knew. All right. When you lay down cow poop, on a field to help your crops grow, and the excess gets washed off into the river, then carries out to the ocean, which definitely causes algae blooms. So, drainage from livestock. Back to that, knowing your poop. Okay. Sewage, which is, like a sewer pipe. Strange enough, people don't realize this, but like, you flush your toilet and it's got poop in there and urine and all that, and it goes off to a water treatment facility. But so do the sewers. And when it rains, it flushes out the sewers and brings all that water to the water treatment plant, which can't hold up with it. And then it gets washed out to the rivers here in the United States anyway. And then it just gets, you got a lot of toxic water after it rains in the rivers. Erosion of topsoil. Topsoil is the one with all the nitrates where stuff grows, and when it washes away, man, it goes into the river. It causes that natural phenomenon and just makes stuff grow. Uh, can it can be point sources and non-point sources. So, um, just with it. So it can be a single incident, or it can be a whole lot that kind of go into like the topsoil. So, topsoil, you can't just point at one point source, it's a bunch of them. The process of eutrophication. First, fertilizers wash off into a water source. Second, the phosphates allow algae to grow faster. And then, because you've got the algae growing fast, it's going to carpet the water and not allow sunlight to get through. When the sunlight does not get through, the plants below it, which are all of them, end up dying. So, looking for a volleyball? Gotcha. Go for it. Okay. Anytime. Um, lack of sun. Yeah, plants die, lack of sun. All right. Fifth, more algae equals more zooplankton, which eats it. More zooplankton means you're going to have more fish because the fish eat the zooplankton. And more fish eating the zooplankton then goes down. But then that usually means more algae as well. So it's the algae ends up winning no matter what, basically. So this six, the algae die because they've done nothing else. There's too many of them, and are decomposed by aerobic bacteria. Um, there's not enough oxygen in the water though, and then because no oxygen in the water, everything dies, and no more food chain. So anoxic oxygen levels cause anaerobic decomposition and dead organic material forms sludge at the bottom. Turbidity increases. So without oxygen, you can't have aerobic respiration. Without aerobic respiration, you're going to have anaerobic respiration, which is not efficient. Stuff ends up as sludge at the bottom. It gets stirred up and it forms that turbidity. Yep. And eventually, what happens is everything settles and it's a clear blue lake. And the system starts over again. But as you know, you can't just snap your fingers and make all the animals and plant life come back in a lake. It doesn't work like that. So, yep. All right. Biggest dead zone in the United States, from what I've heard, is the Gulf of Mexico. It's mostly from runoff from agricultural nitrates and phosphates in the Mississippi River. So, look, we got tons of farms in the Midwest and in the South. It's pretty good cash crops out there. So anyway, we put down fertilizers. Those fertilizers run off into the river. Mississippi River brings it on off into the Gulf of Mexico, where you then have all these fertilizers that really make it. So those algae blooms are like yummy, and they prosper and they grow, and then everything dies because of it. All right. Um, One solution that's been talked about is nutrient trading. To me, it's kind of like carbon credits, and it also kind of makes me think of. I'm trying to think of the term, but yeah, it's can't think of it right now. Low nutrient polluters can sell their nitrogen credits to higher nitrogen polluting farms. Um, it works for like the low nitrogen farms And also for the high nitrogen farms too, because the high nitrogen farms are going to try to lower their nitrogen, but they can't as much as the ones that are already low. And the low ones, they get rewarded for being low. So let's talk a little bit about red tides. Happens in coastal waters. All right. Um, it's caused by excess nutrients and increased number of phytoplankton. So if the species is dinoflagellate, the bloom looks red, which is why they call it the red tide, because it's red, looks red. It's right by the coast where the tide comes in. The phytoplankton algae produce a toxin that kills fish and accumulates in shellfish. For fun, look up what happens to humans if they eat a clam affected by the red tide. Not good. All right. So the red tide really kills fish and makes the clams and shellfish and oysters, mussels, where you can eat them, but it's not going to result in something you want. Eutrophication is more evident in non-moving water versus moving water. When you got moving water, it's constantly like kind of like gets induces more oxygen because there's more oxygen and also too it's really not a good growing environment for the algae. So moving water tends to help us out a little bit more. Dams would have a problem with that though, I would think. Eutrophication management strategies. Look at page 233. If your first name starts with A to G, tell me about altering the human activity producing pollution. If your first name starts with H through N, tell me about regulating and reducing the pollutants at the point of emission. If your first name starts with O through Z, tell me about cleanup and restoration. Thank you very much. Yep, fast video.